There's been a lot of discussion about Clackamas Fire's response in 2020 and the impact on Estacada. Would you mind responding and expanding on that?
Yeah, I'll go on and start, and if anybody else wants to chime in, please do. Man, the 2020 wildfires. That was day one of me being the operations chief in 2020. And for 96 straight hours, I was awake, responding to the needs of the community with every single member of Clackamas Fire with what we were facing. I've read a lot about what the community feels. I've had a lot of conversations with George Youngberg, who I respect dearly. And for that community that's out there, would love for you to reach out to George, because he'll back what I'm saying to you here. 2020 was like something we had never faced before. The preparation, I don't think any of us expected what that night was going to bring. We started to get an understanding of some forecasted weather a couple days prior, but I don't think any of us, and I certainly did not, know what was coming our way and what potential we could be facing until about 6 p.m. that night. I know that there's community members within the Estacada area that are very frustrated with Clackamas Fire, and they have every right to be. But I'm going to tell you something, that in the areas where we did not win, where we failed, there were areas within Estacada where we won. There were some heroic things that I saw from the men and women of Clackamas Fire in partnership with the community members, that, to be quite honest, I get a little bit emotional about, because I saw amazing work from our firefighters and the community members rallying together to save homes and to save neighborhoods. I saw pockets where there was greatness that happened. I also saw areas where I'm not too proud of with our response. And so something that we did after going face to face with George and talking with him and hearing his concerns and hearing the concerns from the community at that time, something that was really, really important to me as the operations chief was to expose our underbelly and bring somebody in from the outside to give us an analysis of how we responded to the 2020 wildfires. And we brought in Kim Zagaras from Cal Fire and Bob Roper from Ventura Fire, which are very well respected agencies within the California system that face these catastrophic fires quite frequently. And we had them come in and walk us through where we failed, where we won, and where we need to improve in the future, not only locally, but regionally and at the state level. And you can access that after action review on our website. But I'm going to ask Brent in a little bit to dive deeper into that after action review and what we learned and where we are now today from that. But before I do, I want the community to understand something, because it wasn't just one fire that we were facing. In the first 12 hours, starting at 6 p.m. on the night of the 7th, is when the first call went out. That's when I left my home and went to the center of the fire district. And we had 35 fires, working fires, from 6 p.m. until 1 a.m. that morning. And of those 35 fires, 11 of them were greater alarm fires. And what a greater alarm fire is, we have a predetermined amount of resources that we send to structure fires or wildfires. Anything that's a greater alarm would be doubling the resources from a first alarm. So typically for a first alarm, we have 4 fire engines, a ladder truck, a heavy rescue, a medic unit, and a battalion chief. A second alarm, which is considered a greater alarm, doubles that first alarm assignment. So we had 11 greater alarm fires that happened within the first 7 hours of that incident. And it wasn't just within Clackamas Fire. They were within Malala. They were in Colton. They were in Estacada. They were off of Dowdy Road. They were in Springwater area. And so what we did is we did an emergency callback and called back all of our resources from at home to respond and meet the needs of the community. And what we thought was gonna be an isolated one-night event turned into a 2-week event. But what I don't know if the community fully understands is that within the first 72 hours before the state of Oregon and the federal system came in, and a delegation of authority was assigned over to them, we responded to 144 working fires. 144 working fires, and of those 144 working fires, 35 of them were greater alarm fires. And of those 35 greater alarm fires, 6 of them went the duration of the event. And as the operations chief, knowing that the resources in Molalla, knowing that the resources in Colton, knowing the resources that were in the county, there was not the amount of response from those neighboring agencies into their own area. I took a posture and I made the decision as the operations chief to divide our resources to respond to all fires that were within that area. I immediately called for mutual aid from Tualatin Valley. I called for mutual aid from Portland. I called for the state of Washington and the state of Oregon, but I didn't realize that the whole entire state was on fire. What we faced, ladies and gentlemen, was a 135,000 acre wildfire from Riverside Fire that came bearing down on our communities in Estacada. 135,000 acres. What we also faced was, and I think the name of it, was it the North Complex? Is that what we ended up calling it? It was the North Cascade Complex, which was made up of the Dowdy Road Fire, the Unger Road, Wilhoit, Graves Creek, and then the Springwater Fire. And those fires combined were about 11,000 and some change in acres that were on fire. So in totality, within the first 72 hours of this fire, we had 149,000 acres of fire bearing down on Clackamas County, and we didn't have additional help. And so what I did is I divided all of our resources to try to mitigate the damage that we were going to see. Was that the wrong decision? I'm going to tell you no, it was not. I would make that same decision again. And I would make that same decision to divide our resources because that's what the community needs. And fires don't have any geopolitical boundaries. Human beings do. And our focus at Clackamas Fire was to save lives and protect as many homes as we could with the natural disaster that we faced. Where we failed was not the men and women of Clackamas Fire that showed up from home or that showed up from the stations to answer the 911 calls. We did not fail with firefighters working for 96 hours straight to try to answer the 1,300 apparatus responses that they faced within that time period. Where we failed was at my level. Where we failed was getting ahead of educating the community and listening to the community the day after the fire ended. And that's on me. That's on me and our organization, because what we wanted to do was gather as much information as we could and then respond to the community. And at times it's too late. And that falls on the organization, but not the firefighters. That falls on me. And so we've learned since then. And Brent, would you just walk us through a little bit of the 2020 after action review and really the precipice of where that's started to get us to where we are today?
Sure. Yeah. So after the 2020 fires, Chief Roper and Chief Zagaris came in and did a complexity analysis of what we faced during that time period, and then what our capabilities as an agency were. Clearly, as Chief just explained, that event completely overwhelmed not only our agency but the system as a whole. I think there's a expectation out there from the lay public that you're going to have a fire engine at every house, and we could have had the state of Oregon. When I say we could have had every fire engine on the West Coast up in Oregon at that time, and we still would not have had enough fire engines to put one at everybody's house. So that's just a physical impossibility. But after that, the analysis was that we needed increased capabilities for the risks facing Clackamas Fire. We've seen a progression of environmental conditions change for a myriad of reasons that aren't really consequential to this, but they're happening nonetheless. And so they recommended that we have a more robust system for training and accountability. They recommended that we look into aviation assets. They look into having contracted resources for heavy equipment, things of that nature. We partnered with the Oregon Department of Forestry and other partners, specifically Clackamas Community College. And we started to put some of those things into action. So we're one of the few entities within the state that has what's called the instant qualification system. It mirrors the federal training and standards for the state side. We've also implemented our Type 2 IA crew, the first of its kind hand crew hosted by a municipal agency anywhere in the region. That includes Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. So we've taken more steps towards wildland than I think anybody else in the state, especially from the municipal side. When we had the event in 2020, we had a total of 9 dedicated apparatus for wildland. Today, that number exceeds 20, in addition to the crew. So we've taken steps to answer the calls that were done in the AAR. And I would put us as the leading entity within the structural fire service regarding wildland fire in the state of Oregon.
Thanks, Brent. I think that shows who we are and when our actions match our words. We said we were going to look at ourselves, and we did, and there's still a lot more to go with this. But would you dive a little bit deeper into Crew 30 and what their capabilities are and really what they are? Because we've mentioned that a little bit.
Yeah, so Crew 30, like I said, first of its kind municipal hosted wildland hand crew hosted by a municipal fire agency anywhere in the region. We've got anywhere between 20 and 23 people. They're seasonal firefighters that come on in early April, and they'll go until the end of the fire season, which is about the 1st of October. They are a Type 2 IA crew, meaning that they can be broken up into smaller modules and act independently if the situation dictates that. Historical conditions haven't needed a resource like this in the Northwest. We leaned forward after 2020 and in partnership with the Clackamas Community College to put this resource together. Since that time, they've traveled all over the Western US on fire assignments from Alaska to Alberta, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and I expect, other places, Kentucky as well. So it's been an incredible resource, not only for Clackamas Fire. They responded to 5 incidences last year within our boundaries here, but they also supported in Alberta, Central Oregon, and other places across the West. These individuals go out, get that experience outside the area when our fire danger is low, so that they can hone their skills. And then when our fire danger is high in August and early September, they're back here trained, ready, and able to respond to any emergencies that are located in the district. Specifically to Sandy in 2023, when we had the Camp Creek incident and the Bull Run watershed, Crew 30 was on the first day, one of the 2 crews that were ordered right away, and they were out there on the very first day of that incident and continue to be on that incident for the next 60 days. That's 60 days until the snow finally flew in November. So they are a local resource. They are well trained, well qualified to do the work. When I started working for ODF back in 1999 in this district here, I would have never believed that we would have had the wildland problem that we currently face, much less that a municipal agency was going to host a 20-person hand crew. Now that has only borne itself out over these 5 short years to be incredibly valuable, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
Awesome, thank you, Brent. Was there any follow-up online to that question at all, or anything that needs further explanation? Or is there anybody in here?
Chief, if I could, I think one thing that kind of left out was right after that, and, you know, my summation is, could things have gone better? Obviously, everything, 100%.
Yeah.
But from working with Clackamas Fire, what we all noted was, hey, we could have done things better, or we put it differently, we screwed up in different areas.
Yes.
And things have been moved along quickly to correct that. I mean, if you look now, up on Furwood, we have ODF there all summer.
Yeah.
Right? That we didn't have before. We've got the hand crew that we talked about, that is specifically for wildland fires,
Yes.
not for structures. And the other one is, we're a community here, and we got together under, it's actually Phil pushing for it or directing us, is the Eagle Creek Station.
Yeah.
It's right next to Estacada.
Yeah.
That was before that was staffed 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And by us combining our resources, your tax dollars, we were able to staff that. So now that's the first backup that Estacada has. And that wasn't there before. But after we came out of the fires, I remember sitting in this room and, hey, how do we get this going so we can get 24 hours a day? And I'm sorry, I just wanted to get that in there.
No, I think that's a really important point. Thank you for adding that. Is there anybody else in the room for clarity on the Estacada question? Okay.
Okay, this question is back to the Estacada fires. Thank you for the explanation on Estacada fires. Can you speak to the why firefighters were told to stand down and not protect people's homes? People were being threatened with arrests if they are protected in their own home.
Yeah, I can speak to that, and then Brent, if you back me because you were overseeing that division. But this was a county-wide, it was actually a Marion County and Clackamas County decision from the state. So it wasn't just isolated to Estacada. This was a mutual county agreement based on what Beachy Fire and what the Riverside Fire were going to do. So much about these major catastrophic fire events are weather patterns and what the fire is going to do. The state's meteorologist called the state's incident commander and said, what I am seeing is a potential for the Beachy Creek Fire and the Riverside Fire to merge together. And what everything is lining up based on the fuel modeling, the humidity, the winds, is that what we are going to see is a plume driven event. Is it driven or dominated?
Dominated.
A plume dominated event. And Brent, before I dive in a little bit deeper, would you just walk through what a plume dominated event is?
Yeah, so specifically to this incident, you had two fires. You had the Beachy Creek Fire and you had the Riverside Fire. And both fires are obviously generating a tremendous amount of heat and a tremendous amount of smoke. And that smoke are those particles as they're lifted into the atmosphere. There's actual weight to that. So you had two large, heavily involved fires that were producing a massive amount of what I'll call weight in that smoke particulate. And they're lifting into the atmosphere with that thermal convection. And so as ground resources, all we saw, much like the community, was utter darkness. So we could not really see the defiant column. So we're operating under that, really kind of almost blind in a sense. And so as those two columns, the fear was as those two columns and the weight within those two columns would merge together, at which point the weight of that column would overwhelm the thermal activity that was lifting it and cause that column to collapse down upon itself. And what that would do, just like when you dump water down, it would force that rush of air back down and almost fan the flames. I'm not a meteorologist by any stretch of the imagination. This was all being told to us, those people who were operating in the darkness, in a sense, who could not see the columns. So I'm reliant as the person on the ground in trusting the people that are telling me this is a high likelihood of probability. Therefore, if this does happen, those outflow winds are going to spread this fire all over the North Willamette Valley. At which point, it's going to be a destructive force unlike anything anyone had ever seen. So as that's being told to me, I'm like, well, gosh, this is already more destructive than anything I've ever seen. I can't imagine it getting worse. It was under that direction in office is that we said, hey, we're gonna gaggle up our resources, keep them in the city of Estacada, so that one, if this happens, we know where people are, and two, we can immediately re-engage the fire if necessary. But having us all strung out, if something like that was gonna happen, was not gonna do anybody any good. So that's what was told. I had to trust because I could not verify for myself, or none of us could. So, as far as the discussion regarding, arrests in people's homes, I'm not a law enforcement officer. We don't even, pull the evacuation, orders. We recommend to the sheriff's office to do evacuations. We're there to fight the fire, to best of our ability. So, we did that. Fortunately, that column did not collapse, I think for all of us. And I think we were there in that parking lot for about an hour and a half at most. And then we re-engaged the fire just like we were before and everybody was safe. One thing I want to note about the 2020 fires that often gets overlooked, unlike the Palisades, unlike Thomas Fire, sure, unlike Camp Fire, these California conflagrations, which are more in alignment with the fire conditions that we were facing at that time, we didn't have a single person or life lost during this event.
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing because life safety for the public, for our firefighters, that's first and foremost in my mind. We can rebuild houses, as tragic as that is. I cannot rebuild a life that's lost needlessly. So that's what we were focused on that time. When those conditions did not come to fruition, we immediately re-engaged with that fire.
So, thank you for that description. Being inside the incident command post, I've got a little more information that I can share. And I'm gonna tell you that phone call to Brent and to Mark Corliss and to Brian Stewart, who are the division supervisors for Unger Road, for Estacada, and for Dowdy Road in the Springwater area. That phone call was really tough to have because our firefighters, we do not retreat. We do not retreat. We stay and we fight and we draw the line in the sand and we're protecting that area. When the meteorologist called, rallied up with the incident commander from the state, as well as CCSO, and the information that we had was a 90% likelihood that was going to be a plume-driven event. I said, what's that mean? The state, for the most part, echoed exactly what Brent said. And so we formed a strategy where we assigned, I broke our resources up into a third. Brent and his division, which covered basically Estacada to the border of Colton. And then we covered from Colton and basically west. And then to the south, we had at Dowdy Road in Springwater. What we decided to do was the last thing we wanted was fire to get behind us. And so we pulled back resources, like Brent said, to cover the city of Estacada. And we ordered some additional fire engines to come code 3 from neighboring agencies, which at that time they were able to respond to buoy up the Estacada community because we were not going to lose the city of Estacada. And I pulled the resources back to Highway 211 in Colton. And then we pulled resources back to the other side of the river in case we had what they were predicting was 15-mile spot fires if this event happened. And so I divided and I took a countywide approach, much like I did the first night. And I don't know what was said on out in the community. I know that I went face to face with a bunch of community members that said that. We don't have the power to arrest anybody, like Brent said. But what I will tell you is that drew a lot of fear from our firefighters. And the other order that I gave to every single one of those divisions was do not let a community member pull all community members out as we are getting out. And so I don't know, other than what the community is telling me, who said it. But things like that were said, and I'm sorry that was said. But like Brent said, our number one focus was to get community members to safety from what we thought that was going to happen. And there are tactics to use to do that threatening to arrest somebody, I don't think is the right tactic. But I will tell you that there was a lot of fear amongst our firefighters of losing lives, not only of the firefighters, but the community members we've sworn an oath to protect. So that's the response to that question. Is there any follow-up, or did we answer? Yeah, please. Sorry, Steve.
I just wanted to add that I've heard several times about Clackamas Fire abandoned Estacada. And that post actually came from the city. And I was in that parking lot, we were all up in that parking lot, we took that time to get filled with water, get fuel, we sent like one at a time and just waiting to go back to work. And I would encourage those citizens that believe that we abandoned, we were in the Estacada High School parking lot. And Ken Oliver, an elected official still there today, was up there with us, and Mayor Drinkwine was there with us. We never abandoned anything, we refueled and waited to go back to work, which is exactly what we did after an hour or so.
Okay, we have a follow-up on costs. Does that mean if Sandy is annexed right now with the increase from 217 to 242, then again in 2027, there will be an additional 52 cents, making a total of 292 for Sandy residents?
Great question. So just some clarity, it's not 242, it's 240.12. So it's basically $2.40 from what you currently have, which is 217. That would happen now. With the expiration of the levy in May of 2028, should the elected officials decide to move forward and renew the levy, whether or not that comes in May of 27, November of 27, or May of 28 when it retires, when that levy retires, that would be determined by the elected officials. But yes, it would go to is that 290? Yeah, it'd be 292 per thousand.
If it passed.
It passed. But the voters from Sandy would be able to vote on that.
The thing we wanted to is if the Sandy Fire District is annexed in, then that levy, if it does go back before the voters, the Sandy Fire District residents, if it passed, would then become Clackamas Fire District residents.
Correct.
And they would have the ability to vote on that levy.
Yes.
As well as every household within Clackamas Fire District.
As well as any future measure that ever came forward, right? That gives the community the opportunity to vote.
Oh, and Chief, I think you mentioned it earlier too, that should that happen and a future levy was approved by the global group, then the Sandy residents would be paying the same exact amount that the other 200 and something thousand residents of Clackamas willingly pay.
Yes.
All the communities, they all pay the same, and they all share all of the resources together. So
yes,
so they would be no different than the rest of the fire district citizens. And then also the second point is, should the increase happen out here, well, then maybe you could touch on, you kind of mentioned it, if it generates an additional blank amount, what are potential additional resources that could be allocated out here in Sandy because of that increase?
Yeah, I think that's a fair and great question. So anytime that I'm going to come to the community and I'm going to ask them, because I understand the importance of what a dollar is to community members, it's not going to be for a status quo. I'm going to improve resources. So if the community of Sandy and the elected officials feel like that we're going to renew this and move forward, then I'm going to add staffing to the community of Sandy. So currently, right now we know at 240 per thousand that I can have a fire engine with 3-person and a 2-person rescue. Well, if the levy passes, well, I know that I can add more resources and a different type of apparatus. What that looks like, I don't want to promise the community right now. I don't want to promise the community that it'll be a ladder truck. I don't want to promise the community there'll be another fire engine side by side. I don't want to promise the community that it'll be a fire engine staffed at another fire station within Sandy. What I will promise the Sandy community is it'll be more firefighters in the community of Sandy to respond out of the Sandy fire stations. What we try to do in our business model at Clackamas Fire is the revenue that comes in from the community of Sandy stays in the community of Sandy. And that's something that the boards have agreed on, and that's our business model. We share the resources to, if there's a fire and boring, the Sandy, fire engine will respond to boring. That's where the benefit to not only the community of Sandy, but also the community of boring comes from. So to answer your question, we'll base that decision at that time of what type of apparatus, based on the analytics that we're seeing, would make the most sense. Because the reality of it is, if we are seeing the continued trend of wildfire, I don't know if it's gonna be a ladder truck or a type 3 a brush truck. There's just a lot of different things that we can do. But it gives us the opportunity to be strategic within the community of Sandy about adding more resources and the typing of resources that we have.
Me, as a board member, going through again, my job is look at budgets and help with trying to make fiscal decisions. And chief, after we rolled out the rescue rig, it's my understanding that within Clackamas Fire District, hugely bigger,
Yes,
you weren't really having this type of rescue rig before being rolled out in 2 other locations.
yes.
And why?
But we
Because,
saw the efficiency that had happened here.
right, it's
Yeah.
less wear and tear.
Correct.
As a big rig running around, you
Yeah.
get there faster.
You get there quicker.
And what I learned from you guys is time matters,
Yes,
right? And so if you break down the number of calls that come in here, or I mean, I know it doesn't matter which station, it's 75–80% paramedic calls.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's what we want, one organizations that can bring you a paramedic, a firefighter, you know, wildland, diversity,
yep.
so.
Anything else regarding that question from the panel that I didn't answer?